Welcome to adilas. This is a tutorial on how to create an expense receipt and place it on account for a credit card that will be paid at a later date. So this is a credit card that doesn't flow through your bank on each transaction. In other words, if you use this credit card, the credit card company is going to send you a summary, a statement at the end of the month, and then you're going to make a payment on that. So what you would do is you would choose, and you would already have set up your vendor. So I'm going to do capital 1, and I'm going to choose vendor, and I'm going to hit go. And so once I find my vendor, capital 1, and this would be every time I use this card for capital 1, I would create a receipt to capital 1, and I would put in my expense receipt amount. So let's say I spent $50 on gas. And if you want, you could put a note in here that this was at, say, this was at 7-Eleven. And then I would come down here and I would choose my type. And if you don't have your type in here, so I don't see gas, fuel, and oil in here, I'm just going to put not sure. And then once I add that type, I can come back and change this to gas. I would choose the location that it's applied to. And then what I would do is I would click here to place it on account because I'm not paying for this expense right at this time. And then I would create my expense receipt. Once I have the expense receipt created, I could then go here and I could scan in the actual the receipt that I received from the 7-Eleven store where I purchased the gas. And then to show you what happens with this is once you have that expense receipt in there, if you go back to your main switchboard and you come under System Liabilities to your Payables homepage, and now if you scroll down a little ways, you can see under Capital 1, I do have Capital 1 in place here for $50. If I click on this, it has over here where, because there's only one expense, it shows that this one expense is ready to be paid. Now to show you what would happen if I spent another one, so let's go back up here to Capital 1. I'll create another one. So we'll say we have two expense receipts that we did. So I'm going to create a receipt, and this time I'm going to say that I went to Walmart and I spent 77 or whatever, 87.99, and this was office supplies. And I could put in here that this is Walmart. We do have on our tick list where we're going to allow for an additional vendor that would be like Walmart, where if it was paid to Capital One, you would have another selection that would show you could choose your additional vendor. That's on the way. For right now, if you put it in the notes section, that serves a purpose. And then I'm going to choose down here, I do have office supplies in here as one of my line items, and I will choose the location. I'm going to place this one on account. So on account means that I'm going to pay for this later, so I'm going to be paying Capital One later. Add my expense receipt. Now if I go back to my Payables homepage, which you can either go back to the main switchboard or there's a link here to go to Payables homepage. Oh, I would scan in the receipt here that I got from Walmart, so I have verification in case of an IRS audit or whatever that I do have that receipt. So I go to my Payables homepage. Now if I come to Capital One, you can see that this amount has increased. So if I go to the 137, here now are the two expense receipts. And as you can see, this could just build up. This could be 50, 60, 20, whatever. When you get the Capital One bill, you would match up these. So you would go down the bill and you would say, yep, there's the $50, yep, there's the 87. And if you needed to, you might even have to split one of these. Like if you only wanted to pay $100, you could put $50 in here. And then when you click pay, it's going to just pay a portion of this one, and it would leave the extra $37 for the next month. So if you only wanted to pay $100 on your credit card. Additionally, if there's interest that's been charged on your credit card, you would additionally go back up here to vendor and find Capital One again, and you would create an interest expense for that. So maybe I did have interest, you could create interest and then come back to payables and your interest would be in here. Whatever amount of pieces that you spent on that credit card would go in here, including the interest, and then at the end of the month when you're going to make your payment, you could either pay the card in full or you could partially pay the card. So once again, this has been a tutorial on how to pay create an expense receipt and set it on account for a credit card. And to do that, you would start by setting up the vendor, which there's another tutorial on how to set up vendors, and then you would find that vendor, your Capital One for instance. You would come down and you would create an expense receipt for that vendor. Once you create the expense receipt for the vendor, if you go to your Payables homepage, you're going to be able to see on the Payables homepage where you brought in those Capital One payments. And once you click on that, you're able to sum these up and pay for either all, or in this case a portion of that, including interest if you wish. And that way you can send one check off to Capital One. This concludes how to net up credit card payments, and thank you for choosing adilas.